Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
And welcome, everyone, to the Monday edition, the Columbus Day edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Ian Tuttle of National Review is in for Jim Garrity today. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. And once again, Jim escapes having to diagnose a really depressing night when it comes to the 2016 political season. Ian, you managed to be with us on a number of Wednesdays during the primaries after Donald Trump racked up primary win after primary win. And now you get to join us on a Monday after the second presidential debate. I'm sure you're thrilled to be here.
This is really just unacceptable. I'm going to start docking Jim's pay. You know, the primary debates were one thing, but after the weekend we've had, he owes me a nice cocktail. That's for sure.
All right. Well, as we did with the first presidential debate, we're not necessarily going to have good, bad, and crazy. We're going to kind of diagnose Trump, Hillary, and then the moderators, in this case, moderators / questioners from the audience. So let's start with Trump. The big issue hanging over the debate, of course, heading into this from the 48 hours prior to the start of the debate, was the revelation of the tape that Trump had done, probably unbeknownst to him, but back with Billy Bush in Access Hollywood back in 2005, in which he talked about how he was aggressive with women, to put it mildly, just would kiss them. And he said because he's famous and he's rich that they would let him do it. And then he even talked about grabbing them in inappropriate places and so forth. So we knew this was going to come up early in the debate. It did. Here's how Trump addressed it.
This was locker room talk. I'm not proud of it. I apologize to my family. I apologize to the American people. Certainly I'm not proud of it, but this is locker room talk.
And here's how Hillary responded to it.
He has said that the video doesn't represent who he is, but I think it's clear to anyone who heard it that it represents exactly who he is, because we've seen this throughout the campaign.
We're going to have a lot of negative stuff about Hillary Clinton later, but Ian, that was basically right. I mean, she ticked off a lot of things about Trump getting in Twitter fights with Megyn Kelly and all sorts of other people throughout this entire campaign. One of the more depressing parts about this, even if you reluctantly come to the conclusion that Trump, with all of his deep flaws, would still be preferable to Hillary, the amount of actual defending of Trump and what he did back in that exchange with Billy Bush by conservatives and even some evangelical conservatives is just mind-numbing.
Oh, it's extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you have Jerry Falwell, coming out, Tony Perkins of the Family Research Center coming out and saying, that he's going to stand by Trump. I mean, this is just, it's unreal. I mean, Meghan McArdle, I think, said it well this morning on Twitter. Basically, both major parties in the United States are now on record defending sexual assault if it's a powerful person who does it, which is just a catastrophic development, a true literal demoralizing event in American politics. Look, Hillary is right on this, not just because of what we've seen over the course of the campaign, but because what we know of Trump's whole life. This is the man who flaunted his affair on the covers of New York City tabloids, who publicly mused that he never had the chance to seduce Princess Diana. I mean, and then it comes out that he's a serial groper. These people are actually surprised. I mean, this is the Trump that has existed all along. And that's one of the other flaws among many in the defenses here is, this was 10 years ago. He was 59. He was on his third marriage. Look, Trump is, I've said this, and my colleagues have said this, and Jonah especially, Trump is now who he has always been. He was the same man at 21 as he was at 35, as he was at 59, as he is now at 70. And that's not going to change. If you choose to pull the lever for Trump, that's a decision that you can make, are welcome to make, but do it with your eyes open. This is a disgusting man, and that's not to degrade any of the horrible things that Bill Clinton did or Hillary Clinton did, but this is a deeply flawed, deeply immoral human being, and there's just no way around that.
We're going to get to another part of Trump in just a second, but a very quick aside, your quick analysis of Trump bringing the Clinton victims to the debate.
Well, I mean, all of last week I said, I think we're going to get a more sedate Trump, and I don't think he said last week that he wasn't going to do this. Of course, all of that was out the window as soon as the revelations dropped on Friday. I still think it's bad politics. The fact is that polling, focus group polling, has shown since 2000, when Hillary ran for the Senate, that dredging up bills passed doesn't usually play well with voters, especially doesn't play well with married sort of suburban women, the type that Trump needs in suburban Philadelphia. That said, this was a unique debate. We knew that as soon as the tape dropped on Friday, we knew that Trump was going to sort of ratchet things up to DEFCON 4. I think what probably happened is it didn't help with the type of swing voters that he needed, but it probably riled the base that was feeling like they had been thrown back on their heels. And if those are the people that Republican office holders who might have been on the fence about defecting are listening to, that base might be strong enough to keep some of them from abandoning Trump going forward.
To the surprise of some, as we round out our first martini, a lot of people thought that overall Trump did better in this debate than he did in the first debate, that he got the better of Hillary Clinton on a number of issues, one of those being Obamacare, and that was one of the questions from the audience, that basically Obamacare is a disaster, as we would put it in Trump parlance, and that was the premise of the question. Hillary Clinton, of course, trying to say we want to keep every wonderful aspect of this program, but just make it cheaper. So I'm sure she's got a plan for that. Trump, I think most people would say he's probably in the right area on concept here, but when it comes to details, as you listen to this clip, he hasn't exactly learned a lot since the primaries.
Obamacare will never work. It's very bad health insurance, far too expensive, and not only expensive for the person that has it, unbelievably expensive for our country. It's going to be one of the biggest line items. We have to repeal it and replace it with something absolutely much less expensive.
And then he talked about getting rid of the lines, which we remember talking about in the big exchange with Marco Rubio several months ago, which would expand competition. And he's right, but Ian, just his lack of detail on this, and you don't need to be completely wonkish about it, but know a couple of states and how much their premiums have gone up, how much deductibles have gone up. And he did mention those things, but just saying it's a disaster or when I get it, it's going to be terrific. You got to do better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. He had a perfect opportunity to hit Hillary on something pretty significant, in part because her own healthcare plan is magical thinking. She wants a public option, a single payer system. And that's going to be worse. And anybody who has sort of a basic grasp of this can articulate why that would be a worse option even than what we have now, and what a responsible alternative might look like. Trump just doesn't have any of those facts at his fingertips because he's not disciplined enough to learn them, and I don't think particularly cares about learning them. And likewise with the larger conceptualization of a real plan, like what's been put forward by policy wonks like Yuval Levin or James Capretta or Ovik, Roy, or what's been put forward by other folks in Congress like Paul Ryan. He also had an opportunity to do something that I think is important, which is split the difference. Hillary said repeatedly that, and she might be right on part of this given Trump's inarticulate approach to this. She said he wants to just repeal it and he would make us start again from scratch and get rid of all the good parts of Obamacare, like coverage for pre-existing conditions or coverage for young people up until the age of 26, which are two things that are overwhelmingly liked by the American public, according to the polling that we have. She's presenting there a false choice. It's not we keep everything and make it better, or we go back to the beginning and people die in the streets. We can. There were already movements in health insurance markets to even before Obamacare to create those types of plans. And so, Trump had an opportunity to say, look, she's giving you a false option. We can keep some of these good things, but we certainly need to do some major reforms here. And here's what I would do, X, Y, Z. He can't do that. And it was a missed opportunity to connect with exactly the types of swing voters that he needs.
Let's move on to Hillary, because there's plenty of horrible things to point out about Hillary Clinton last night. She was just off her game, largely because she doesn't have a record she can defend very well on any of these issues when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to health care, when it comes to her own personal conduct. We're going to talk about the moderators towards the end here in our last Martini, but even though we're going to be somewhat critical of them, and rightly so, they actually did ask some questions that were much more challenging to Hillary than Lester Holt asked a couple of weeks ago. And one of them was about her emails, and another one was about the WikiLeaks release, saying that in her private speeches she said it was important to hold a public view on a policy as well as a private view of a policy in order to get things done. And here's how that went down.
2 from Virginia asks, is it okay for politicians to be two-faced? Is it acceptable for a politician to have a private stance on issues? Secretary Clinton, your 2 minutes.
Right. As I recall, that was something I said about Abraham Lincoln after having seen the wonderful Steven Spielberg movie called Lincoln. It was a master class watching President Lincoln get the Congress to approve the 13th Amendment.
I think I should
Mr.
respond
Trump.
because it's so ridiculous. Look, now she's blaming, she got caught in a total lie. Her papers went out to all her friends at the banks, Goldman Sachs and everybody else, and she said things, WikiLeaks, that just came out. And she lied. Now she's blaming the lie on the late, great Abraham Lincoln. That's one that I haven't. Okay, Honest Abe. Honest Abe never lied. That's the good thing. That's the big difference between Abraham Lincoln and you.
And so that was one of Trump's better moments of the debate, ripping apart that pathetic excuse by Hillary Clinton. Ian, very late in the debate, one of the better audience questions had to do with what you're looking for in a Supreme Court justice. And Ian, I know what Hillary Clinton's looking for in a Supreme Court justice, but my jaw was on the floor when she actually gave this answer.
I want to appoint Supreme Court justices who understand the way the world really works, who have real-life experience. I think the current court has gone in the wrong direction. And so I would want to see the Supreme Court reverse Citizens United and get dark, unaccountable money out of our politics. Donald doesn't agree with that. I would like the Supreme Court to understand that voting rights are still a big problem in many parts of our country, that we don't always do everything we can to make it possible for people of color and older people and young people to be able to exercise their franchise. I want a Supreme Court that will stick with Roe v. Wade and a woman's right to choose, and I want a Supreme Court that will stick with marriage equality.
So, Ian, basically I'm looking for a Supreme Court justice that agrees with me exactly on policy. And I think the most troubling part there was I want someone who understands how the world really works, which means Constitution, schmonstitution.
Right. I mean, I don't think she used the word Constitution in the answer.
No.
The real life experience is her version of Obama's empathy. It's all these extraneous virtues, quote unquote virtues that she wants to bring in. Basically, what Hillary Clinton wants in a Supreme Court justice is Hillary Clinton. She just wants the Supreme Court to be another arm of the executive bureaucracy. It's really quite stunning that she was sort of bold enough to say it in almost as many words. The thing about Hillary Clinton is it's amazing, just to sort of step back, it's amazing that she's been doing this for 20 plus years and is so bad at it. She is so unlikable. She's untrustworthy. She can't connect with normal people in a town hall style audience, a town hall style debate. She should be clobbering Donald Trump. She should be, absolutely wiping the floor with this borderline unhinged man, and she can't get anywhere close to doing that. It's really just a reminder of what an extraordinarily inept politician she is, to a very real extent. I think that's, to a point, for conservatives also a good thing, in that she's likely to be the next president, and in all likelihood she's going to be a very unpopular one, and perhaps not a very effective one, depending on the state of Congress. So there's a very, very faint silver lining in that, but it really is extraordinary. And lastly, I should just say, I think during that the first exchange there we played, I think Abraham Lincoln, wherever he is like, please just don't bring me into this. Just leave me out of this debate. I don't. You got to think he's rolling over in his grave on that one.
Oh man, yeah, Hillary, inept, corrupt, and wrong on literally everything, I think. So anyway, on to the final martini now, and let's talk about those who asked the questions. One of the things that Trump got upset about was the fact that he kept getting interrupted. Now, when Raddatz and Anderson Cooper were keeping time, I think that's something they have to do in order to keep the horses going in the right direction, but they also like to parry with him when it came to the actual answers he was giving while he was giving them. Here's a quick montage.
Ambassador Stevens.
The question is that the discipline of a good leader?
Said a lot of things. I think we should.
We can Mr. Trump. We're going to go on. This is about the audience.
Disaster as a
Mr.
senator.
Trump, we're going to move on.
Oh, please.
You didn't delete him?
Allow her to respond, please.
Personally,
what do you think will happen if Aleppo falls?
I think Aleppo is a disaster, humanitarian.
What do you think will happen if it falls?
Getting a subpoena from the United States Congress.
We have to move on. Secretary Clinton, you can respond, and then we got to move on.
We want to give the audience a chance
here. In jail, let alone after getting a subpoena from the United States
Secretary
Congress.
Clinton, you can respond. Then we have to move on to an audience question.
Speaking of those audience questions, we mentioned a couple of them that I thought were quite important, Ian. There was one on Obamacare that was very well crafted, I thought. Supreme Court, there was a pretty good one on energy by the now very famous and popular Ken Bone. Then there was the one that was kind of leading, but still a very fair question given Trump's rhetoric about Muslims in America. Those were substantive questions. And then we got other ones. Do you feel you're modeling appropriate and positive behavior for today's youth? If you have to ask that of either of these candidates at this point, you're just not paying attention. There was the other leading question. What specific tax provisions would you change to ensure the wealthiest Americans pay their fair share in taxes? I'm sure that guy's really still undecided. The always tough to answer question, do you believe you can be a devoted president to all the people of the United States? And the one that everyone seemed to love on Twitter at the end of the debate, Ian, but I thought maybe it was just because of all this raw sewage that was flowing throughout the debate that people liked it. But would either of you name one positive thing that you respect in one another? It's a nice moment, but it doesn't really help you decide who's going to be the better choice for president since we don't have a good choice. So a lot of inane questions. It makes me wonder whether this format, and I know it's one that Jim blanches at quite a bit, is one that we should keep having.
Yeah, I think that's an open question. I don't recall it being quite so nauseating in 2012, but it really wasn't a town hall debate. It was Anderson and Martha Raddatz, and then a couple, people who asked questions off note cards. It was kind of like the primary debates where they had, people ask questions on screen. There really wasn't, and the fact that they couldn't respond didn't give you any sense of really the sort of energy in the room. So I'm not exactly sure, what the great virtue of these debates is. On the subject of the moderators proper, I'm pretty low key about moderating. I just, I like to think that it's a very hard job, and that if I were tasked with doing it, I would be miserable at it. And so I cut these folks some slack, especially since they're on stage with whether it's a primary debate or a general election debate, some of the most egotistical, self-absorbed people in the entire country, or else you probably wouldn't be up there. They've got a tough job. What drives me absolutely up the wall, though, is when moderators do the debating. This drives me crazy, and it happened This was the reason that Candy Crowley was so egregious in 2012, is she became a participant in the debate, not just trying to keep things moving along. And Martha Raddatz did the same thing last night. And I'm biased on this because I don't like Martha Raddatz as an anchor. I think she's grating and often quite obnoxious. But there was a segment last night on the Aleppo question where she started arguing with Donald Trump on the policy. And that's not an exaggeration in the slightest. It was extraordinary. Hillary Clinton's words were being thrown across the stage and coming out of Martha Raddatz's mouth. It's just an incredible act of ventriloquism. That drives me absolutely crazy, and I don't understand, if you're a moderator, how you can conscientiously do that. I mean, it's a complete dereliction of the reason that you're there. But at the end of the day, as sort of subpar as at least Raddatz was, Anderson Cooper was a little better, though not terrific. The simple fact is that the real disaster, the real disasters, were the candidates. There's no getting away from that fact.
No, and we got one more. And Chris Wallace has said that moderating is different than interviewing, so we'll see if he comes at it from a different approach than the previous moderators have, because they like to interject quite a bit so far, but Raddatz has definitely been the most egregious, as you mentioned. So, Ian, you've survived again. I don't know exactly what day we'll have you back, but I'm sure something will have horrifically happened the day before.
I mean, it is October.
Have a great day. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Greg. You too.
Ian Tuttle of National Review in for Jim Garrity today. I'm Greg Columbus of Radio America. Thanks for being with us. Jim will be back on Tuesday. Join us then for the next 3 Martini Lunch.